My son heard his future mother-in-law call me a disaster in front of 200 wedding guests, and before I could even process the shame burning my face, he looked at his bride, saw her laughing, and stopped the wedding with 6 words that changed everything. "This wedding is over. Everyone leave." The room went dead, silent. I thought the worst moment of my life had already happened. I was wrong, because what my son did the next morning would tear apart a family that had been smiling with secrets behind their teeth for months. My name is Carl Fisher, and I was 59 years old on the day my son's wedding fell apart. If you had seen me that morning, you never would have guessed I was walking into disaster. I had pressed my best shirt twice, polished my work boots until they looked respectable, and even trimmed my beard extra neat. My only son, Tyler, was getting married, and that was enough to make every ache in my joints feel worth it. I'd been up since 5 a.m. checking the gift envelope for the 3rd time and loading my toolbox into the truck. Yeah, my toolbox. Tyler had asked me to bring it because the hotel's cake table was wobbling, and he knew I could fix it in 5 minutes. That's what fathers do. We fix things. I spent 32 years in construction before my back made me retire at 57, and there wasn't much I couldn't handle with the right tools. The wedding was at the Grand Magnolia Hotel, one of those fancy places with marble floors so shiny you could see your reflection. Not my kind of place, but Tyler's fiancée Monica had her heart set on it. Her mother, Beverly Grant, had made sure of that. Beverly was the type of woman who treated money like armor and used her smile like a weapon. She'd made it clear from day one that my blue-collar background was an embarrassment to their family image. Let me tell you about Beverly Grant. She owned some high-end real estate business downtown and drove a BMW that cost more than I made in 2 years. She had perfectly styled hair, designer clothes, and the kind of attitude that made you feel like you were tracking mud just by existing in the same room. From the moment Tyler brought Monica home for dinner, Beverly had looked at my modest house like it was contaminated. The first time she visited, she walked through my living room, the room where Ruth and I had raised Tyler, where we'd watched him take his first steps on the hardwood floor I'd installed myself, and said, "It's very authentic." The way she said it, you'd think authentic was another word for pathetic, but I kept my mouth shut. That was my mistake. See, I learned early that silence keeps the peace, especially when you're dealing with people who have more money than manners. Ruth, my wife who passed 4 years ago from cancer, always said I was too quick to swallow my pride for the sake of family harmony. She was right about that, like she was right about most things. The wedding planning had been months of small cuts. Beverly would suggest improvements to everything I offered to contribute. When I volunteered to build a wooden arch for the ceremony, something I could have made beautiful in my workshop out back, she hired a florist instead and told Tyler it would look more professional. When I offered to cater the rehearsal dinner at my house, she booked a restaurant that cost $150 a head and said it was more appropriate for the guest list. Every suggestion I made got politely dismissed. Every tradition I wanted to honor got replaced with something more expensive. And through it all, Monica would give me these apologetic looks while doing exactly what her mother wanted. The girl wasn't evil, just weak. And weakness, I've learned, can be just as dangerous as cruelty when it lets bad things happen. The morning of the wedding, I arrived early to fix that cake table. The ballroom looked like something out of a magazine, white roses everywhere. Crystal chandeliers hanging like frozen fireworks and enough candles to light up a small town. I found the wobbly table and had it steady in 10 minutes with a few washers and some adjustments to the legs. Simple fix, but it made me feel useful in a place where I clearly didn't belong. That's when I first heard Beverly talking to the wedding coordinator near the entrance. She didn't know I was there, hidden behind the cake display, finishing up my work with my head down like always. The groom's father, Beverly was saying, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. He's not quite our social circle. We're just hoping he doesn't do anything too embarrassing during the photos. My hands froze on my tools. The wedding coordinator made some polite noise, probably uncomfortable but not wanting to offend a paying customer. Beverly continued, "Monica keeps saying Tyler's devoted to him, but honestly, the man lives in the same little house he built 25 years ago. No ambition, no refinement. At least after today, we can start working on Tyler's perspective about family priorities." I stood there holding my wrench, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. This woman was talking about me like I was a problem to be managed, not the father of the groom. The house Ruth and I built with our own hands, where we raised our son, where we made every payment and fixed every leak, she called it little, like it was something shameful. But the worst part was what she said next, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret with a conspirator. "Glenn thinks I'm being too harsh, but you have to understand, Tyler inherited his father's sentimental streak. All those little traditions, all that blue-collar loyalty, it's charming until it gets in the way of real success. We need to help him see the bigger picture. I packed up my tools and left without saying a word, but something had changed in me. I started paying closer attention to everything. The way Beverly talked, the way Monica acted around her, the way conversations stopped when I entered a room. During the rehearsal dinner, the night before, I watched Beverly work the room like a politician running for office. She introduced Tyler to her business contacts, talked about expanding his horizons, and made sure everyone knew about his engineering degree and promising career. But every time someone asked about his family background, she'd give a tight smile and smoothly change the subject to something else. Monica seemed caught between loyalty to Tyler and fear of disappointing her mother. I saw it in the way she'd start to include me in conversations, then back down when Beverly shot her one of those looks. The girl wasn't born evil, just raised by someone who was. Sometimes that's worse because they don't even know they're doing wrong. Glenn, Beverly's husband, barely spoke above a whisper anymore. Poor guy had been married to that woman for 30 years and looked like he'd given up fighting long ago. He'd catch my eye sometimes across the table with this apologetic expression, like he wanted to say something but didn't have the courage. I understood that feeling better than I wanted to admit. The wedding ceremony started at 4 p.m. sharp. The ballroom filled with guests in expensive suits and designer dresses that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. I sat in the front row on the groom's side, wearing my best shirt and tie, hands folded in my lap like Ruth taught me to do in church. Tyler stood at the altar looking nervous but happy, adjusting his collar the same way he used to adjust his Little League cap before a big game. That gesture made my chest tight with memory. Ruth should have been there to see this. She would have cried happy tears and told everyone within earshot how proud she was of our boy. Monica walked down the aisle in a dress that sparkled like she'd been dipped in starlight. She really did look beautiful, I'll give her that. Glenn walked beside her looking like a man heading to his own execution, but he managed to smile for the cameras. The photographer kept snapping pictures of everything, the flowers, the rings, the guests, even me sitting there trying to look like I belonged. The officiant began the ceremony with some talk about love and commitment and building a life together. Traditional vows, classical music from a string quartet that probably charged more per hour than I used to make in a day. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But I'd learned enough about construction to know that sometimes the prettiest facades hide the worst problems. Then came the moment that changed everything. During the exchange of rings, Monica's little niece Nancy, the flower girl, maybe 6 years old, dropped her basket and started chasing the scattered rose petals across the marble floor. Kids do funny things at weddings. A few guests chuckled softly. The photographer crouched down to get shots of her gathering the flowers, probably thinking it would make a cute, candid photo. I bent down to help her gather the petals, just being helpful the way you do when you see a child struggling. Nancy looked up at me with these big brown eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry, mister. I didn't mean to mess up." "You didn't mess up anything, sweetheart," I told her quietly. Flowers are supposed to be scattered. That's what makes them beautiful. She smiled and kept picking up petals while I handed her a few more. It should have been nothing, just a grandfather-aged man helping a little girl at a wedding. Sweet moment, maybe worth a photograph. That's when Beverly stood up from her front row seat and snapped loud enough for everyone in that ballroom to hear, "Can you not make this about yourself for 1 minute?" The room went silent so fast it felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the space. I froze with rose petals in my hand, Nancy looking up at me with confused eyes. The officiant stopped mid-sentence. The string quartet's violins died in the middle of a note. Every head in that ballroom turned toward us like we were the main attraction instead of Tyler and Monica. Beverly pointed at me with a face twisted in disgust, her perfectly manicured finger shaking with rage. "You're not a father," she said, her voice carrying to the back row where Tyler's work colleagues were sitting. "You're a disaster." The gasp that went through the room felt like a physical thing, like a wave hitting the shore. My face burned so hot, I thought I might pass out right there on the marble floor. Nancy dropped the petals she'd been holding and ran back to her mother's arms, probably thinking she'd done something wrong, and then I heard it. Monica's laugh. Not nervous, not shocked, not the kind of sound you make when you're embarrassed by someone else's behavior. A real laugh, small but unmistakably amused, like she'd been waiting for this moment and finally got to see the show she'd been promised. Tyler heard it too. He turned his head slowly from the altar and looked at his bride with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. "What's funny?" he asked quietly, but his voice carried in the dead silence. No one answered. Monica's smile faded fast when she realized everyone was staring at her. Beverly lifted her chin like she'd done nothing wrong, like calling someone's father a disaster at his son's wedding was just normal behavior. That's when my son's eyes went cold. I'd only seen that look a few times in his life, once when a bully picked on a smaller kid at school, and once when a contractor tried to cheat us on a job. Tyler looked at me sitting there with rose petals in my hand. then at Beverly standing there like an avenging angel in silver silk, then back at Monica. "This wedding is over," he said in a voice so calm it was terrifying. "Everyone leave." People gasped. Someone dropped a champagne glass near the back, the sound of crystal breaking echoing through the ballroom like a gunshot. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note, their bows frozen above the strings. Monica stared at him in shock, her mouth open but no words coming out. "Tyler, what are you doing?" she finally managed to ask. He stepped back from the altar, away from her, away from the officiant who was looking around like he'd never seen anything like this in 20 years of performing weddings. "I asked you a question. What was funny about my father being humiliated?" "Nothing," Monica said quickly, her voice getting higher. "My mother was stressed. She didn't mean," but Beverly cut her off, stepping forward with her chin raised like a queen addressing her subjects. "Don't apologize for speaking the truth. Your father needs to learn appropriate behavior for occasions like this." That did it. Tyler looked out at the 200 guests sitting there in stunned silence. His work colleagues, Monica's sorority sisters, Beverly's business associates, all of them dressed in their finest clothes for a celebration that was dying in front of their eyes. "There will be no wedding," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not today, not ever." The room exploded. Monica shouted his name. Beverly screamed something about ungrateful children. Glenn grabbed Beverly's arm, trying to pull her back down into her seat. Geist stood up, confused and whispering, some already reaching for their phones to capture whatever this was turning into. And Tyler walked straight to me, took my hand like he did when he was 7 years old and scared of thunderstorms, and said, "Come on, Dad, we're leaving." I don't remember walking out of that ballroom. I only remember the feeling of every eye on me, the sound of expensive heels clicking on marble as people moved around in chaos, and Tyler's steady hand on my arm as he led me through the lobby and out into the parking lot. Outside, the evening air hit my face like cold water. Tyler kept walking until we reached his car, then stopped and leaned against the hood, breathing hard like he'd just run a marathon. "Tyler," I said, touching his shoulder. He turned to me and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not just heartbreak, not just anger, something deeper. Certainty. The terrible kind that comes when you finally see the truth about people you thought you loved. "Dad," he said, "I need you to tell me the truth right now. Has Beverly or Monica ever said anything to you about the house?" My blood went cold. "Why are you asking that?" He looked back at the hotel, lights blazing through the windows where our disaster of a wedding was probably still unfolding. "Because this morning I found some papers in Monica's overnight bag. And if what I read is real, this wasn't just about embarrassing you in public." He pulled out a folded document from his jacket pocket. "They were planning to take the house, Dad, after the wedding." I stared at the paper in his hands like it was a snake. Before I could ask what he meant, a black car pulled up to the curb with its engine still running. Glenn got out, holding a manila envelope with hands that shook so badly the paper rattled. "You two need to see this," he said, glancing back at the hotel entrance like he expected Beverly to come charging out any second, before she gets out here and stops me. Glenn looked like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was crooked, his usually neat hair was messed up, and his eyes had that hollow look you see in men who've been carrying secrets too heavy for their shoulders. "This is proof," he said, opening the envelope with trembling fingers. "Proof that Beverly went too far this time." Inside were property transfer documents with my name printed at the top, documents I'd never seen before, with letterhead from some legal office I'd never heard of. The paperwork claimed I'd agreed to transfer partial ownership of my house to a family trust that would be controlled by Beverly Grant and Monica Price. "I never signed anything like this," I said. Glenn nodded quickly. "I know. Look at the signature." There it was at the bottom, my name written in handwriting that looked close enough to mine to fool a stranger, but not close enough to fool me. The C in Carl was too round, the F in Fisher slanted the wrong way. Someone had practiced my signature, but they hadn't practiced it well enough. Tyler read through the papers faster than I could, his jaw getting tighter with each page. "This says Dad agreed to estate planning for family security after I got married, but the trustees listed here are Beverly Grant and Monica Price." He looked up sharply at Glenn. "What's the real story?" Glenn sat down heavily on the hotel's stone steps like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "Beverly's business is failing, has been for over a year. She's drowning in debt, but she keeps spending money to look successful. When Monica got engaged to you, Beverly saw a way out of the hole she'd dug." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "A way out how? Your house sits on prime property. Beverly had it appraised last month without telling anyone. It's worth at least $420,000, maybe more. She figured if she could get legal control through family trust arrangements, she could use it as collateral for her business loans." The number hit me like a physical blow. Ruth and I had bought that house for $85,000 in 1989. We'd put every spare dollar into improvements, every weekend into repairs, every dream into making it perfect for our family. And this woman saw it as nothing but a number on a loan application. Tyler's hands were shaking now, and Monica knew. Glenn closed his eyes for a moment before answering. Monica knew enough to help. Beverly convinced her it was just smart estate planning, protecting your inheritance from taxes and legal complications. But Monica helped gather information Beverly needed. What kind of information, I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Glenn reached into his jacket and pulled out more papers. Beverly had Monica copy your house key last month when she borrowed your jacket at that family barbecue. Beverly used it to get into your house 3 days ago while you were at your doctor's appointment. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed Tyler's arm to steady myself. She broke into my house? I whispered. Glenn nodded miserably. She was looking for documents to help forge the transfer papers. Your will, insurance policies, anything that would make the fake trust look legitimate. I felt sick. That house wasn't just property to me. It was every memory Ruth and I had built together. It was where she'd fought cancer for 2 years, where she died holding my hand in the bedroom we'd shared for 30 years. And this woman had walked through it like she was shopping for furniture. We need to go home right now, I said. We drove to my house in silence, Glenn following in his car. The neighborhood looked peaceful in the evening light, porch lights coming on, kids riding bikes before dinner time, Mrs. Cooper watering her roses across the street like she did every evening. But when we pulled into my driveway, I knew immediately something was wrong. The porch light was on. I'd turned it off before leaving for the wedding. Tyler noticed it too. Dad, did you leave that light on? No. The front door was locked, but when Tyler checked around back, we found the kitchen window slightly open. I never left windows open when I wasn't home, old habits from 30 years of construction work in neighborhoods where you learn to secure everything. Inside, the house felt different, not obviously disturbed, but wrong somehow, like when someone's been in your workshop and moved tools just slightly out of place. In my study, I went straight to the desk where I kept important papers. The bottom drawer hung open about an inch. I pulled it out completely. Empty. It's not here, I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. Tyler checked the other drawers while Glenn stood in the doorway looking guilty as hell. What's missing, Dad? The folder with Ruth's insurance papers, the house deed, my will, everything Beverly would need to make her fake documents look real. That's when Tyler spotted something else. A folded note lying under the desk lamp, placed where I'd be sure to find it. Tyler picked it up and read it, his face going white as paper. What does it say? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. He handed me the note. The handwriting was Monica's. I'd seen it on thank you cards and wedding planning notes for months. If you had just known your place, none of this would have gotten messy. I sat down hard in my desk chair. Not an apology, not an explanation. A threat. A promise that worse things would happen if I didn't stay quiet and let them steal from me. Tyler pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. But before he could dial, someone started pounding on the front door so hard the whole house shook. Through the window, we could see Beverly's silver dress reflecting the porch light. Tyler looked at me, then at Glenn. Stay behind me, he told us both. He opened the door just wide enough to see out. Beverly stood on my porch still in her wedding attire, but now she looked like a beautiful woman who'd been caught in a rainstorm of her own making. Her makeup was smeared, her perfect hair was coming undone, and her eyes had a wild look that made me think of cornered animals. Monica stood beside her, still in that wedding dress that now looked more like a costume from a play that had gone horribly wrong. How dare you ruin everything? Beverly snapped at Tyler. Do you have any idea what you've cost us? Cost you? Tyler repeated. You broke into my father's house. Beverly pushed past him into my hallway without being invited. We were protecting family assets, something your generation doesn't understand. Glenn found his voice for the first time all evening. Beverly, stop, it's over. She spun on him like a snake. Go back to the car, Glenn. You've done enough damage. But Glenn stepped into my hallway and said something I never thought I'd hear from him. No, that simple word seemed to shock everyone, including Glenn himself. No, he repeated, stronger this time. I'm done being afraid of you, Beverly. I'm done pretending what you do is normal. He reached into his jacket and pulled out another envelope. These are copies of Beverly's real financial records. Her business has been failing for 2 years. She owes $340,000 to various creditors. Her business license is under review for fraudulent practices. She was planning to use Carl's property as loan collateral to save herself from bankruptcy. Monica looked at her mother like she was seeing a stranger. Mom, you told me this was just estate planning. Beverly grabbed Monica's arm hard enough to leave marks. Don't listen to him. He's always been weak, always been jealous of success. But Monica pulled away. You lied to me. You made me help you steal from Tyler's father. That's when we heard the sirens. Mrs. Cooper from across the street had called the police when she saw the commotion. Two patrol cars pulled up to the curb, their red and blue lights painting my quiet neighborhood in colors that didn't belong there. Beverly tried to push past everyone to leave, but one of the officers called out, "Ma'am, stay where you are." The next hour was a blur of statements and evidence. The officers documented everything: the forged property transfer papers, the stolen documents from my desk, Monica's threatening note, the copied key that Glenn had found in Beverly's purse. When they searched Beverly's car, they found my original papers and something else that nearly broke my heart: Ruth's jewelry box from our bedroom dresser. I hadn't even realized it was missing. Ruth had kept her wedding ring in that box after the cancer made her fingers too thin to wear it. Beverly had just taken it like it was nothing more than something shiny to grab. The officers arrested Beverly for breaking and entering, document fraud and theft. Monica wasn't arrested that night, but they made it clear she'd be facing charges for her part in the scheme. As the police cars drove away with Beverly in the back seat, Glenn stood in my yard looking like he'd aged 10 years in one evening. "I should have stopped her years ago," he said. "I looked at this broken man who'd spent 30 years being afraid of his own wife. We both made mistakes," I told him. "But we don't have to keep making them." He nodded and got in his car. The last thing he said was, "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." Tyler and I went back inside our house, the house Ruth and I built. The house I'd raised him in, the house no one could take away from us now. We changed all the locks that night, working together in my workshop, the way we used to when he was a boy learning to use tools. 6 months later, Beverly was convicted on multiple fraud charges and lost her business license. Monica cooperated with prosecutors and received probation, but she moved back to her hometown and Tyler never spoke to her again. As for me, I learned the most important lesson of my life. Silence isn't golden when it lets people walk all over the things that matter most. Sometimes protecting your family means making noise, even when it's uncomfortable. I still live in the same house Ruth and I built together. And every Sunday, Tyler comes over for dinner, just like he always did. We don't talk about that wedding much, but we both remember the night we learned that family isn't about keeping quiet, it's about standing up for each other when it counts. I learned that day that sometimes the people who smile the prettiest are the ones planning to hurt you the most, and the only way to stop them is to refuse to be quiet when they expect you to disappear. Respect isn't something you earn by staying small and keeping peace. It's something you demand by standing up for what's yours and never apologizing for the life you've built with your own hands.